Welcome to Founder Stories. I'm Mike Abbott. With me today, I have Deena Varshavskaya
You nailed
from
it.
Wanelo. Welcome.
Thank you.
So first, tell us a little bit about Wanelo.
Sure. So Wanelo comes from want, need, love. It's a community for all of the world's shopping. So what we're doing is we're uniting all stores and all products into a single social platform.
Now, you started the company a couple years ago. Tell us a little about how you came up with the idea and how you actually have got the company now to a place where it has millions of users.
Yeah, so I was always frustrated with shopping. I'd go to a mall and I would be frustrated with the fact that it's a very limited, predictable selection of products and stores, right? And as someone who really likes to express myself through the things I wear, through the things I have in my house, I always wanted to find that one specific, unique thing that, does the perfect job of expressing my taste, and that was really tough. And so I started wondering, why isn't it possible for me to find out what my friends shop for easily, and what stores they like and what stores they recommend? And social networking was just about to start happening in a big way, and I started realizing that there's a huge opportunity to create an experience that's fully social, that's only 100% focused on shopping.
And you were a solo founder, right?
Correct.
And
Yes.
so, fast forward, you've been a solo founder, now you have a company raised, north of $10 million in financing, very, very high traffic site. What are some of the kind of top 2 or 3 things that you've learned as being a founder and CEO?
Sure. So one thing that I've learned that's really helpful for me is how to focus myself. So I always, as a startup founder, you basically are going to be tremendously busy, right? From financing to hiring to responding to customer requests, you're going to be constantly kind of barraged with things to do. And so what I find that's really helpful for focusing myself is to ask myself, what is the bottleneck to my progress right now, right? And if I ask this question with a lot of integrity and push myself to find the thing that is fully actionable, I can then find a way to focus my day on just that thing. And I love saying no to everything else because that one thing becomes the only thing that matters.
Just saying no is tough.
I love saying no.
I really admire that. We were just talking about that before around business development. I think it's one of the challenges, though, is I think, at least for my experience being a founder, you get bombarded, especially after you have a little bit of success with meetings, and you can kind of lose your entire day by just not saying no enough.
Right, so you just have to learn that.
It's really a discipline.
But once you do, it feels good.
So that's one. Give us a couple others.
Well, and one thing that's worth noting about that is that once you find your bottleneck, and I can actually give you a specific example that might make this a little more practical, right? So say fundraising. Fundraising was something I personally really didn't want to do. And, product work was really fun, building my initial product was really fun. And then once I got to fundraising, it was sort of scary. And it was something that, I read about it, I've heard advice about it, right? But I really, myself, did not want to do it. And the way I focused myself was by asking this bottleneck question. And what I got to was I needed to increase the number of conversations I'm having with investors, right? And that was really actionable, very practical, and really helped me focus myself. And it kind of made it so that I went from something that was entirely overwhelming, such as, I need to raise money, to, I just need to have more conversations with investors. That's kind of easy. Right, so that was really great. And then the other thing that's really cool about bottlenecks is that, or that's helpful to understand, is that they're going to continuously evolve, right? So once you've addressed that one bottleneck, then you have to urgently move on to your next one, and it's going to be a continuous process of doing that.
It's really insightful. I like that.
I like
so that's one. What else is kind of first-time founder, CEO, that you've kind of maybe had a certain expectation turn out to be different or whatnot?
Yeah, so you're not going to be ready ever, right? So I think one kind of key tension that a lot of people go through is this idea of preparing, right? Preparing for your challenges. And the way I prepare is essentially by throwing myself into it, right? And so I like to think of startups as a series of black boxes. An example of a black box would be fundraising. Another example would be building your team or building your product, right? So what it looks like is that it's an area of experience that you've heard about, right? And to kind of vaguely know what fundraising is, but again, you don't know what it truly is. And what I experienced for myself, for example, was that fundraising was, again, scary and overwhelming, and it was that drive to be perfect about it that made it extra kind of, overwhelming. And so at some point, I just had to say, what, screw all the advice. I really don't care. I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to figure it out by reading the advice, and I'm going to just do it, right? And so I opened the box, I got in, and I started doing, and that's what's really helpful. So thinking of a startup as a series of black boxes that you're going to continuously be going through, I think is a good framework.
I really like that.
Cool.
I can kind of relate it to my own experience.
Right.
I mean, because you don't have all the answers, and you can read about it online.
You have to acknowledge it fully.
The reality is like every situation is so different.
Right.
And until you do, you just don't know, which is, I think, part of the spirit of even the show, which is like, how do you share your journey, with others as you've gone through? It's always a big challenge, I think, sometimes for non-technical founders to hire engineers, and I know I get asked that a lot, and so it's tough. So I really admire kind of how you've kind of come up with that framework. If you were going to go back and do it again, I mean, obviously you're in the process right now. I'm wondering, as a solo founder, did you ever think about getting another co-founder, or was like, hey,
yeah,
this
absolutely.
is
Yeah, I
my
spent
vision.
an entire year interviewing people for that role.
And you ultimately you just didn't find someone that shared
I
the vision?
started working with a couple of people who were absolutely fantastic, but ultimately I realized that they weren't going to make take the plunge and actually commit to this full time, and I just felt that we were going to need to put in way more effort, so I let that go. And then I met with a couple other people who were, possible, but I just said, I don't think it's a fit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that finding a person to truly partner with is really challenging.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah.
You don't have a historical context. So,
yeah.
So since you didn't have it, you kind of built these friends or advisors around the company, like the CEO,
yeah.
right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And I'm kind of curious how you built that, not being from here, and like how did you build up that network of advisors? Because I think, especially for a lot of folks that are maybe not from the Bay Area or the new, like how do you kind of get that team around you going? Because it is really hard to build a company.
Right, absolutely. What I found is that it was really similar to actually building the team, is that if you're after something of substance and you're someone who's actually building something of substance, people will come along and they just support that. And so, I showed up to San Francisco just about 3 years ago and started immersing myself in the community, and kind of very quickly started finding people who, would kind of give me their vote, essentially, mm-hmm. right? And that just is an organic process that continues. I think people are naturally seeking out others who are up to big things, and they want to be a part of those great things.
Yeah, even if that be a part doesn't mean an employee, maybe it's just someone.
Correct.
Do you think that pay it forward culture is unique to like San Francisco, the Bay Area, or do you think that other cities have that? And how do you think that relates to entrepreneurship?
I do think it's unique to San Francisco. I don't know if it's just the pay it forward. I also think it's just we have such a high concentration of builders here, right? People who just can't help themselves, basically. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and I've lived in LA for several years and dabbled in the startup community there, and I think it makes a really huge difference having experienced it firsthand.
Now, how big is the company today? How many employees?
People, we're 28.
And so, walk us through when you have 5 people and you have 15 and 30. Like, how do you structure your meetings or sync ups? Because that's at 30, you tend to have some type of structure.
Sure.
So I'm kind of wondering how you evolve that in your company.
Yeah, we kind of follow an agro-agile model.
Agro-agile.
Agro-agile, that's right. There was a little bit of a turning point for us where I guess we found that so we manage all of our projects in Pivotal Tracker, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm in there every single day along with our VP of product. We share that prioritization responsibility. And that's really how work gets organized. And one thing that I did find is as we were sort of crossing the 15 people mark is that certain projects just kind of didn't get enough continuous attention, and so we did have to split them out from the main track, right? Mm-hmm. So there were things like that where I realized that we are a non-hierarchical team, fairly flat. And at some point, it really became very helpful to have people who would get full accountability for a particular
single person would own
for a particular piece. Yeah,
piece.
Yeah.
So you mentioned VP of product. Yeah. And I mean, clearly, your product person is your company, your vision.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about the interaction with you and the VP of product, and how does that work?
It's very unique, I think. I think I'm incredibly lucky in that. He basically surfaced out of the ether. He was someone who, Sean is our VP of product. He comes from Etsy. He's someone who's been deeply involved with social commerce. And so he actually just knew about Wanelo and, kind of at some point was visiting San Francisco and sent me a quick email. And he just wanted to learn more. And if I think about having to recruit someone like that, that's actually very scary.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. It's a real challenge. It's like one of, if not the most challenging.
But I think what's really interesting about this is that, and I'm seeing this as a pattern actually, is that when you are very authentic about what you're building and you put it out there, I do think that the right people just tend to emerge, and that really works in a community such as San Francisco specifically, but also a little bit broader, right? So every so often, a key person will literally just emerge out of nowhere because we are pursuing something that resonates with them. So that's really meaningful.
Well, Deena, it's been so great to have you on the show. Thank you, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.